To make sure I'm on, and I am. G'day. That's going to be super cool. I'm excited for that. And again, if you're joining us for the first time, we really hope it's not going to be your last time. I'd love to invite you back for next week as we kick off a new series. And today, as we finish a series called For the Love Of, we've obviously been delving into a topic, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not. It's a topic we can't avoid. It's a theme that I'm sure is in the middle of your conversations at least once a day with your kids, with your spouse, with your parents, with your boss, with your employees. We've been talking all about wealth. We've been talking about finances, but ultimately within the scope of what Jesus taught, how Jesus taught us to view it, and through the lens of being generous. And so we've been wrestling through that. And if you've missed any of it, I encourage you to go back and look through our YouTube channel or listen to any of our podcasts. So today we're finishing it, and I'm super excited today to be having a conversation as we get into it this morning with a really good friend of mine, Glenn Williams. If we can make Glenn welcome this morning. Stoked to have you here, man.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks for joining. This is a very cool table. I like it. It's a plant. What is this? It's mint. Is it? No, it's definitely not. It's aloe vera or something. It's fake. Okay. It's not. What is it?
It's chlorophytum ribbon plant.
Of course. How did I not know that? Did you know that? Are you a green thumb?
No, I'm not.
You didn't have a head mic. I'm the one with Britney Spears. You got the old.
No, I'm not.
Okay, neither am I.
My wife is.
All right, we've got so much in common. That's amazing. I get the privilege of having coffee with you every so often. Glenn is one of the smartest guys I've ever met, and that's why I try to learn as much as I can from him. You might recognize his voice, funnily enough, from an organization Glenn was involved in for quite a number of years. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so for about 18 years was involved with Focus on the Family, the first 12 years in Australia.
Who recognises the voice?
7 years
there
overseas.
You go. Okay. Can you do a little radio? No, don't do that. You can actually do it. Okay, you were going to. Okay. I didn't think you were going to do that, but the mic went up to you. It's Glenn Williams from Focus on the Family. I have a lisp, so I don't have I got a face for radio, but not a voice for it, so it's quite unfortunate. But one of the reasons we connected, I heard about your work in an organization called Halftime, and you helped to lead that. Can you maybe explain a little bit about what that's about and kind of the mission of it and your role within there?
Sure. All of us go through lots of different transitions in life, and for me, one particular transition was about 10 years ago or so when we came back from the US and relocated back to Australia. And I bumped into a guy by the name of John Sycamore who heads up the work of Halftime Australia. And he just said to me, he said, Glenn, you're in Halftime. And really that season for me was uncertainty about what was next, trying to discover, how do you transition out of something that you've been part of for so long and, and discover what God's purpose is for you next. And I think through that time and with John, I think he helped me to see that there are a lot of people who, we jump on a treadmill, we go to work every day, we do our thing. And some of us find tremendous success and influence through that. And then we get to a point, and it's like, maybe it's not all, didn't quite, turn out to be what I thought it would be. And so we find that there are a lot of people in that space who genuinely want to say, well, listen, I want more than just success. I actually want to do something significant with my life. I want to find purpose and see that as being meaningful and a reflection of my faith. So, yeah.
That is massive. And so you found yourself now helping to mentor people and coach people through. And I think for those of us who would call ourselves Christian, we understand how that obviously fits in perfectly with what Jesus showed us. How do you find having this conversation with people, say, who don't have a faith background, and you talk to them in that space?
Actually, really easy. Because I think it doesn't matter whether you're a follower of Jesus or not. I think everybody wants purpose. Everybody wants something in their life that is significant. They want to be significant. And often for most of us, our significance and our identity, if you like, comes from our work, what we do. And I think, that's fine, but when that's not always there, or when that falls apart, or maybe you've lost your job, or maybe you're in transition, how do you handle that? You know what I mean? So it's relatively easy to have those conversations with people about, well, what's important to you?
Right.
What are the values that are really important to you? And so I think for me and for Halftime, it's really helping people redefine success for them and what that can be.
Can you talk to us a little about what that means to redefine success?
Yeah, Bob Buford, who started Halftime, actually, it was kind of funny. I got a chance to meet Bob a number of years ago, and I said, Bob, tell me a little bit about the book that you wrote, and it's called Halftime, From Success to Significance. And I remember him saying, he said, Glenn, typical Americans, you write a book and all of a sudden somebody wants to start an organization out of it, But, he wrote that book as a result of his own transition, and he had lost his son. They only had one child, and their son was 19 years old and tragically drowned. And he went through a very dark time, and he was a very wealthy, very successful businessman, Bob. And Bob got to that point of saying, well, listen, hang on a minute, I'd give everything back. I'd give it all away if I could have my son back. And so he went through that phase of just saying, look, at the end of the day, what's really important? And, I can earn all this money, I can be incredibly successful, but at the end of the day, it's my family, it's my relationships that are much more important than anything else. And so from that moment, he set out to really use those resources and use the success that he'd experienced to really help other people redefine success for them, and not see that success has to come at the expense of those relationships and marriages and relationship with your kids that are much more important.
That's massive. Now, obviously, you've got something in common now with Bob as well. And I think when we first met, just over a year ago, you'd just gone through the tragic loss of your own 19-year-old son, Ryan, who I know is super loved here. And just around Christmas time, 2019, tragically lost him. And, so many in our community still grieve his loss, and he's left an amazing legacy in the life of our youth ministry. In fact, something he said is like the slogan right now for our youth ministry here, loving is easy, and we love that. And so you're obviously helping other people in this space for like over a decade, and then you were confronted with something similar to Bob. And maybe talk to us a little bit how more clarity came, or how this was reiterated to you, or your journey since then.
Yeah, obviously nothing prepares you for the loss of a son. It's been a really tough journey, and I think we all grieve differently. And I wish I could tell you that things are much better now. There are some days where it's still really difficult, but I think losing a loved one, it gives you a different perspective on life. I think, again, a bit like what Bob said when he wrote his book, we'd give everything away if we could, if it meant having Ryan back for us. But I think for me, it highlights or underscores the importance of not pursuing success for the sake of success.
Right.
But actually seeing success as being part of a process. And for me, redefining success is, how do I create or contribute to other people's lives in such a way where, for us, Ryan was a blessing. We loved his heart for people, and so for us, it's really hard to speak about, to be honest. But I think it just highlights for me the importance of coming alongside people in their journey, no matter where they're at, whether they have a relationship with Jesus or not. And I think, you've got to really appreciate that sometimes people feel judged or ashamed of where they're at and struggling with where they're at. And I think a life of faith, a life with Jesus, is all about saying, you know what, it's okay, we'll walk with you on that journey. And I think that's really what characterized Ryan's life. I think he loved walking with people. And so if we can somehow emanate that and encourage other people to do the same for others, then that's success for us.
I think that is massive. Thanks so much for sharing that. Maybe just a final thought. What part would you say, obviously, in your journey with Ryan and losing him, but also how this works with, I guess, as you put, redefining what success in life means? What part has your faith played in all of that?
Yeah, a really important one. I think there are those days where, God seems quite a fair way off, and I don't think he's moved away. I think, we struggle to see, and I think sometimes we've got to step back and say, okay, God, look, where are you in this? Where are you at right now? What is it you're trying to do in my life, and how are you wanting me to support my family? How are you at work in Ben's life and Chloe's life and Nat's life? And I think, for just trying to take the pressure off yourself a little bit and allow the Lord to be at work in that, and to be patient with that process as well. I think I used to be fairly driven, And so, we do want success. We want to strive for things. And I think the temptation is just, look, let's get through to the other side.
Right.
And I'm not sure there is another side. It's really just a matter of saying, hang on a minute, Lord, let me walk with you, and however long that journey is. And there have been some days where literally I feel like there's been nothing left, and all I've had is just crying out to God, saying, God, listen, I just need you in this moment, whatever that looks like, whatever that feels like, but I just need to know you're there. So for me, my faith is an integral part of my journey and where I'm at today.
Well, mate, your journey has super encouraged me and blesses me and helps me, and I learned so much from watching your courage, you and Nat, and your beautiful children, and we're super grateful for who you are as people, and honestly super grateful that you take time to encourage and share with us today. So we appreciate Glenn this morning. Love you, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jono. Thanks, everyone.
That's awesome. How inspiring, hey? As we finish this today, Glenn mentioned the gentleman he's in business with, and his name is Mr. Sycamore. For all those who are a Dutch background here, we 100% pronounced that incorrectly. I don't know if you can help us. Anyone who's Dutch? Jesse? Sycamore. So I did say it correct. Thank you, Jesse. What does it mean? Nothing. Great. It's in his book, and you can have a read of it yourself. It's called Enrichment, redefining what success means. He shares about his own story and how he grew up in Tasmania, and he was the son of immigrant parents from the Netherlands, from Holland, and from relatives, they didn't really have much, and he had this drive inside of him to be successful, and so eventually his aspirations and his giftings and his frugalness, he had found himself had a really good knack for business and for entrepreneurship. And so he threw himself into it. He moved to the mainland, to Melbourne. He got super successful and met the love of his life, and how the whole process went. And then eventually they're like, I want to build one of the most significant businesses in Tasmania. So they moved back there, and he not only wanted to build this incredibly successful functioning business, he wanted to build the home of his dreams. And so if you've ever been to Tasmania, over one of the beautiful beaches there, he designed this perfectly, this wonderful architecturally designed home, and kind of had it all. So hustled for years, had his kids, had his marriage, and you can read, it's all kind of in the opening chapter of his book. And it explains this moment. The house had been built, it finally been done, the family had settled in there. He came home from a huge long day at the office. By the time he got home, the sun was down, kids were in bed, and he stood there looking out of this beautiful window, could see the beach there, the sun was setting, beautiful moment, in trees around everywhere, and he had his wife on his arm, and he looked out there. And what should have been like a crowning moment, the moment that I've worked for this, I've strived for this, I've prayed for this, I've invested for this, I've hustled for this, he said in that moment, holding his wife there, looking over the view, he felt nothing. He felt utter numbness, and he realized that the woman he had his arm around, there was no love there anymore. He realized he had no relationship with his kids. He was stressed 24/7. He had debilitating migraines constantly, and although he had everything, he couldn't enjoy anything. Now, isn't that like your worst nightmare? That you have invested, you have worked, you have prayed, you've sacrificed, and you can have it all, but then stand there and there'd be no joy, there'd be no life, there'd be no sense of fulfillment, or I have arrived. And I'm reading this going, whoa, like I would never want to be in that position. No one aims for that position, to have all this but not enjoy it. And he said he was rich in wealth, but nothing else. And when I thought about this, and I thought about in terms of what it would mean to have everything and to work for everything, and we're all working, we're all hustling, we all have our own goals, but I think about to what end, and to what do we have to show for it? And even down to something as simple as, can you enjoy what you have? Do we find ourselves working so hard or worrying so much that it sucks all the joy out of life? And I realized something, and this is where I want to finish the series today, that do you realize this is actually what God intends for you too, that God cares about not just what you do, but that you get to enjoy life, that you find rich fulfillment in it, that you find satisfaction, ultimately that you have joy. I mean, this is God cared. This is a God goal that he has for your life. And in fact, we find this very idea in the New Testament. And as after the resurrection of Jesus, as the disciples, it wasn't just about what they believed, but they were trying to figure out, how do we put this now belief about what he's accomplished for us into practice? one of the convictions they came to was that God intends us to be able to enjoy our lives. And as an older man, the Apostle Paul, who wrote much of our New Testament, was writing to his young mentee in the faith, or what he'd call his son in the faith, named Timothy. And as a mentor would, as a good parent would to their child, and trying to pass on good life advice, this is exactly how he painted the picture of what God was like to Timothy. Here's what he writes to him. He says, I want you to hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Now ponder this for a moment. Is this your view of God? Have you ever thought that God cares about your enjoyment? That God cares that you find fulfillment and satisfaction, notice this, in the things that we have. That in fact, that God would provide such things in our life for our enjoyment. Maybe you're from not a religious background at all. Perhaps you're from, a religious background, but your experience has kept you from engaging with faith or church for ages, because maybe God was never like this to you. That in fact, God was about taking your joy, and God set up a whole lot of rules that takes the joy and the fun out of life. So the idea that God provides us with everything for our enjoyment. You were listening to you're reading the wrong Bible. Maybe the page was pulled out by someone in your family who was a grouch. And you don't need to read that part, right? But this is what the first Christians, they understood God like this. They saw God move and minister in such a way in their own lives that as they were writing down what they experienced to their children, they would say, do you realize this is what God is like? He provides you with everything for your enjoyment. I think this is super cool. Now, last week and over the past few weeks, obviously, we've looked at a whole lot of what Jesus taught and around stuff and resources and money and wealth and finances. And we settled with this idea, and we looked at this idea. And again, you can jump back anytime and have a listen. But how God is our provider, how God provides for us. And so we understood that. But Paul takes this a step further. He says that God doesn't just provide for us, God actually provides for our enjoyment. And think of that, because we can often think, okay, you might pray, God, I'm just grateful for, I've got a roof over our head, and I'm grateful for shoes on our feet and clothes on our back and food on the table, okay? Now listen, if that's how you were taught to thank God, that's awesome, because maybe your parents grew up in the Depression, or maybe you grew up in Depression, and so literally having food on the table and a roof over your head and shoes on your feet was a blessing. And so you're like, God, thank you so much that you've just provided my basic needs, right? And that was an honest prayer for you. But listen, you live in Australia in 2021, and comparatively to the rest of the world, God isn't just providing for your needs. God has provided everything for your enjoyment. Now, that's not to feel guilty about or ashamed about. If you were God and you got to view, how do I want people to live their life? Do I just want them scraping by? No, He's a good Father who provides for your needs. And not just for your needs, He cares that you get to enjoy this. So I want you to think about it, because we're all working, we're all budgeting, we're all saving. This is why we have this conversation about giving and generosity every year, because we want to make sure your whole margin of your life isn't just filled with hustle, work, get by, stress, that there's more to your life than that. And it's because God's intention for you and I is that we would be able to find joy in our life. And so the Apostle Paul is passing this on to his son in the faith, Timothy. And he's like, I need him to get this, that yes, God is our provider. And yes, Jesus told us to trust in the one who not only knows what we need, but cares for our needs. But I've learned that it goes way beyond that. He also provides for our enjoyment. And so Paul is writing to his son in the faith, Timothy. And I found a real picture, the painting I did earlier when I was in art school, of the Apostle Paul, it wasn't really me. I don't know who it was actually. I'm sure an art critic here would know. But he would sit down and he'd write letters. Sometimes he wrote it from prison. Other times wasn't in prison. And he had to find a word to convey the importance of this particular idea of God and how to outwork it in our lives. And often in Paul's writing, he would encourage people, and so he'd start a sentence by saying, I exhort you in the Lord, be of good faith, or let me encourage you. Or sometimes it'd even be sterner. It's like, what could I write? I know what's going to really encourage these people. I'm going to beseech you. I beseech you, or I entreat you, or I appeal to you. I implore you. I urge you. But in this occasion, Paul goes for something different. I'm trying to imagine what it'd been like if you're a father or a mentor or someone responsible for the livelihood of someone or someone's growth and maturity or someone look to you for life advice, with many of you, you need to know people are looking to you to get their clue on how to view God or how to approach life and how to view wealth. They're taking their cues from you. And so Paul, not being able to be in person all the time and not being able to just jump on the phone and not just being able to use the intonation of his voice, I can imagine Paul sitting there going, okay, what word can I use to write to Timothy to convey to him the importance of this information? I feel like urge, this isn't strong enough. Beseech, well, we're not even in old England anymore yet, so I can't use that word. What do I do? And he's looking around. He's looking at the cell he's in. He's like looking at the Roman guards. He's like, what words do they use? I know when the boss walks in and tells his underlings to do anything, they bark orders. What's that word? I know what the word is. Command. I'm going to command Timothy. That's the one I'm going to use. Command. This is so, I'm not going to encourage or urge or beseech or implore. I am going to command you to do this. Command. Oh, that's good as well, because that kind of harks back to the old Jewish writings about the 10 Commandments. And also Jesus knew one command. Yeah, this word encompasses everything. I'm going with command. Command. And so the letter gets sent and bound in leather and printed with gold trimmings 400 years later. Well, you get the idea. And so Timothy finally gets the letter. Okay, yes, letter from Paul. I'm looking for some encouragement. I'm looking for some beseechment. Okay. Well, there's no chapter and verse yet, is there? Because it's just one big scroll. But he finds the part. And this is what it says, verse 17 of 1 Timothy. Command. Whoa, Paul's starting out strong. Like, come on, Dad. Like, really? Command? Because every parent knows here, to get a child to do something, you just got to command them. That's all you have to do. First time. So, a command. He's really gone heavy-handed on this. What is he, like, be good to your mother? Like, what's he about to command me to do? Like, stop stealing from the treasury? Or what is it? Command. Whoa. Command those. Okay, so it's not even about me. This is about, so Timothy was a pastor, and he pastored in a city called Ephesus. And history would suggest at its peak, the church in Ephesus had over 20,000 people in it. So can you imagine being the young pastor of that church? So you look into Paul, he ain't tweeting, he's writing. And this is what he wrote. Command those, and he's saying this is those who are in your congregation in Ephesus. Command those who are rich in this present world, not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. Command them. I'm going to read over this again because he's obviously trying to get a point here. Command those who are rich in this present world. And you get thinking about it, rich in this present world, Well, if I look around, I know there's a guy just outside my door here who has nothing. Like, he lives homeless. In fact, half my neighbors are slaves. Like, as soon as I know several cities right now, only a boat's trip away, that are like in famine. We're always only a few days away from starvation. So the line between rich and have nothing, I mean, we view it every single day. So command those who are rich in this present world. Well, if you've got a roof over your head and you've got food on the table, or you just got food in your belly, I mean, you're considered rich. Now let's put it in 21st century, right? If you think about the present world, I don't need to conjure up images of how a lot of the world is today. In terms of the present world, arguably and comparatively, and this isn't even a stretch of the imagination, you and I, if we found ourselves here today in a vehicle, arguably you're rich. You're one of the top percentile of wealthy people on the planet. Now, for some of you, you might be like, yeah, I get that. For some of you, like, yeah, but I'm like living hand to mouth. And I totally get that. That's not to diminish your experience at all. But in terms of the present world we live in, for vast majority, I think it's more than a generalization to submit. Yeah, we are those who are considered rich in this present world. So maybe this command is for us too. So he goes on, he says, I want you to command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant. So before he even talks about an action, he talks about an attitude. Okay, so for those of us here, what does it mean to not be arrogant? I think in terms of my life, like I don't want to just assume that because I've got something doesn't mean I could never lose it. And those of you who've ever lost something you've worked for and lost money you've worked hard for, you'd be like, yeah, that quickly teaches you not to be arrogant. But it also teaches us just because we have a lot, just because we might be considered rich in this present world, we should never view ourselves as better than anyone else in this present world or superior to anyone else in this present world or like that we have more innate value than anyone else in this present world, right? So again, we're to be encouraged. Don't be arrogant just because you're well off, just because you've got. Be careful the attitude that you have in your heart. In fact, more than be careful, I command you, do not be arrogant because you've got stuff, right? This is what he's getting across. Okay, so command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. And isn't this true? I mean, you don't even need me to, again, elaborate this. Again, if you've lost something, you look at the economy, the stock market, I mean, property prices, even here in the Sunshine Coast. For those watching in Canberra, I know you're experiencing a similar thing right now. It's like the whole wealth thing is super uncertain, right? And so he's saying, listen, don't put your trust in something that is so uncertain. Don't pin your hopes and pin your dreams and pin your definition of success on something that is so uncertain, right? And so he gives a huge warning to him. In fact, in other words, he's saying this: you got to remember that you are to only use your money as a resource for hope. You can never rely on it as the source of your hope. Right? It's not the source. It's a great tool. It is a great resource, and it is finite. And often God will call us to leverage it. In fact, this is what in a moment, Paul's going to command Timothy to tell his church to do. But he's saying, listen, this is a resource. It's not the source. So if you've put your hope, I want to make sure I spelt that right. Good, not A-S-A-U. That would have been weird, right? It's the source. But it's not the source. It's not where your hope comes from. He's saying it doesn't come from your finance. But again, he reiterates, and this is the verse we started in this morning. He goes on, here's where your hope comes from. He goes on and says, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. In other words, what's he saying to Timothy? Paul's sitting there writing this, and he wants Timothy not only to get this personally, but he's commanding him to teach this to his own congregation. Saying you've got to command the people to know this and to do this. In other words, he's saying, listen, tell them and command them, don't hope in what you have. Hope in who has you. We can throw that slide up. That was your cue. Okay, there you go. Hope in who has you. And we've looked obviously over the past few weeks that God is for you, God knows your needs, and beyond that, God cares for your needs. So Paul's saying, listen, it's so easy to have to spend all your time worrying about trying to get. Listen, there's an antidote for that. It's trust in God. And you can hope in the one who loves you, who is for you, and who has you. Okay, so Paul settles the big idea, right? There's the big idea. There's the big hope thing. There's the big trust thing, the faith thing, the big command. But then, just when he couldn't go any further, he drops another command on him, okay? And this is where it gets even extra juicy. So he goes beyond this and gives him another command. He goes, okay, this word's working good. I've got Timothy's attention. So again, I want you to command them, not just how to feel and what to think, but here's what to do. I want you to command them. I want you to command them, your congregation, to do good. I want you to command them to be rich in good deeds and to be generous and willing to share. That'll get them, okay? Command. Do good, be rich in good deeds, and be generous and willing to share. Okay, so Timothy's sitting there reading this. And if I was Timothy, I'd be thinking, he'd know like the stuff Jesus taught. And like, hang on a second, command them to be rich. Command them to do good. Command them to be rich in good deeds and to be generous. Wait a second, what does this remind me of? What does this remind me of? Now, it might remind you of something we did a few weeks ago. And we've done this several times. We looked at the idea of the Jewish word tzedakah, which is the definition of what we get for righteousness, which means to be generous and to serve. And so here is Paul reiterating what Jesus taught, that the antidote to worry is to pursue righteousness, which is to be generous and to serve. And Paul's reiterating the same thing as a command. He says, I want you to be rich in good deeds, right? To serve and to be generous and willing to share. So there it is again. So you can imagine Timothy going, there is like a pattern going here. Like you guys are onto something here. And so Paul encourages him, listen, and I want you to tell your church this, irrespective of how much they've got in the bank or they've got in their leather-bound purse they attach to their waist or however people did it in the first century, here's the thing. I want you to command them, wherever their status is in life, whether they're got a stack of wealth or not much wealth, whether they're successful in their own eyes or successful in others' eyes, here's what I want you to command them to do. They are to be rich, to be rich, right? Not to chase after, not just to chase after wealth, but they can be rich. In other words, whether you are rich in wealth or not, we are always to be rich in righteousness. And this is encouragement. So you can be rich without interpreting yourself as someone who has a whole lot of wealth. And so he's commanding Timothy, I want you to teach your people that you are to be rich in righteousness, to be rich in generosity, and to be rich in service. And so this is, and I don't even want you to do it as like a, hey, I encourage you people, let me give you something really inspirational to get you going and share a few examples. It goes, I want you to straight out put this as a command. Now think about this for a moment. Because we often get taught that the idea of being rich or somehow being generous has something to do with having enough. But Paul would suggest here to Timothy that it's not about how much you have that determines whether you can be rich. Being rich has everything to do with what you and I do with what we have. And however much you've got, and whatever your status, however you define yourself, you and I can be rich and you and I can be generous no matter who we are. Now, that's one thing to say it, but let's try flesh this out in practice. So several years back, Chloe and I were newlyweds. We'd saved, we were budgeting, we were working hard. We had these big goals. We wanted to travel and see a whole lot of the world, be based overseas for some time. And so we did it. We had our budget, we were prepared, we had all our savings, and our plan was to like go home broke and start all over again when we ran out of money, okay? So kind of. We didn't really say it in those terms, but it was definitely in the back of our mind. So we're going to go and experience this. Now, we were like, it was tight. We eventually like got jobs. That's its own journey. But when we did, we had a pretty tight budget. And so to give you an idea of just how, we were aware and sensitive to wanting to make sure that we were wise with our finances. I don't know if you remember this time, but we were getting on a bus and it was in London. And we had the finances wrong. We couldn't pay with like a note, and we didn't have any coins. And I'd already paid a coin, and Chloe had a note, and so I had to jump off. And so I wasted £2 on a bus fare that I didn't use, and I pretty much lost the plot over £2. That's how tight it was. Like, I cannot believe this too. And now we weren't poor. Like we weren't poor. We had money, but we had a budget, right? So and we're saving. We had plans, but over £2, which is the equivalent to about 3,000 Australian dollars, I lost my mind. I was like, I can't believe like, we're just unorganized. And quite literally, it was tense. Over £2, okay? About a month or so later, our church had, their annual giving opportunity to all the mission and everything they were involved in, trying to reach the world and serve people in their community and make a difference in the city they were in. And we're obviously part of that church community. And so when it came, I could both feel us putting our hands tightly in our pockets, right? No, we've got our budget, we already like give our, the first portion of everything. We already tithe. Like, God, that is enough. Hands clenched in the pockets. This is £2 is too far. And so we're behind the 8 ball now. I didn't budget to lose that £2, God. And so, but we looked at the need in our city. And here we were budgeting because we had all these great dreams to travel. And there was nothing wrong with that. But then we're like, oh boy, could we started hearing about the needs in London and all the great initiatives and ministries that were happening at the church we're involved in. And I was saying, come on, church, it's our chance every year to fund these incredible ministry initiatives to make a difference in the next generation. Come on, God invites us to be rich in good deeds, to be generous and willing to share. And I'm like clenching tighter and tighter. And I was like, I'm a Jesus follower. Like, what other option do I have? Like, I can't ignore how generous God's been to me. And like, I don't want to underscore that command that was kind of in there. And like, I know we're about grace and all this, but like, we've got to be generous. And so I was like, all right, Chloe, here's what we'll do. This will get us off the hook. Why don't we pray independently of each other and let's seek the Lord privately? And if you're not a Christian here, like, what the heck does that mean? Don't worry, Christian joke, right? It's just another word for praying. And I was like, let's go and we'll go and get our own figure, and then we'll come back, and whoever has the lowest figure, I didn't tell Chloe this, whoever's the lowest, we'll go with that, right? So we did it. We came back with the same figure. And unfortunately, it wasn't low. And so I was like, let's just do it. We've got to be generous and willing to share. Well, we'll take some budget out of our Mediterranean summer vacay to help people who are struggling with their kids, you know? So I was like, that's the Jesus way. So we gave. Now, that enough, that's awesome. Like, we weren't looking for reward or like, look at us. No, that's just, heck, God, this is nothing. This is nothing. Like, this is nothing. But I tell you what did change. The following week, and again, you probably remember this story. We're walking home late one night in London, and a lady came up to us crying, saying, I've lost my phone, I've lost my wallet, I need money to buy one of those burner phones and, get on a bus and to get home, live on the other side of London. And it was the type of lady that, our walls went up and like, as if, But we were like, who are we to say no? Pulled out £20. And again, you think, Johnny, that's so stingy. But I was like, remember a week earlier, £2? Put out £20 and went, God bless you. And she was like, thank you so much, gave us a huge hug. I don't know what she did with it, but something changed in us. All of a sudden, when £2 seemed to be like the end of I'm broken, to here's 20, man, it's nothing. Like, this is the whole point that Paul's trying to get across to Timothy, that he could get across to his congregation, that Jesus is trying to remind people, listen, the moment you choose to engage in the righteous way, right, to be rich in righteousness, it doesn't just change the world around you, it changes the world within you. And where we're bound and when we're fearful and where we're worried about the future, it's like the fear lifts. And here's the thing, Paul understands that dynamic inside of all of us, and he calls it out because he understands the objection that you and I usually feel anytime someone talks about giving or anytime someone talks about being generous. We usually all have the same objection, don't we? Come on, you watching along online, you're with us here, you understand what this means. We're all often being objectional to being generous because we have a fear of the future. Because we don't know what the future holds. We're worried about, will I have enough? And will I be able to gain enough? And if I give here, I'm going to lack there. And this is an unfounded fear. This is genuine fear. This is a real thing. And arguably, this is also wise. You don't want to make unwise decisions with your budget and your finance. I mean, you don't want to give everything away and then have your kids going, Dad, and like my socks have got holes in it, so we want to be wise. But often our hesitation to be generous, to not simply give a little with what's left, but generosity means to give first, to give at the top of your budget. Our hesitation, that's often fear of the future. Now, Paul understands this, okay? And so here he's writing it to Timothy, going, listen, when you command this, your people are going to object because of fear of the future. And so his very next sentence, Paul calls it and addresses this very thing. Here's what he says. He goes, in this way, meaning being rich, being generous and willing to share. He says, in this way, being generous, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age. So he's saying it's not in their saving, it's not in their hoarding, it's not in their investments that they're going to secure a firm foundation for the coming age. He said it's in their generosity. Okay, he's literally arguing that your future will be secured more by being rich in generosity than by being rich in wealth. Now, that doesn't make sense, right? Because you're sitting there going, no, I need to get rich in wealth, then I can set up fund for my kids for uni and invest into their home. And that is all epic stuff. And I encourage, do that. In fact, the Bible would encourage you to do that. It said, you're wise if you leave an inheritance to your children's children. That's a wise thing to do, right? But Paul's saying, here's the thing, to combat your fear of the future, the thing that will remove your worry of not having enough isn't by getting more stuff and saving more money. Remember what he said earlier, wealth is so uncertain. You can lose it like that. He says, if you really want to push against the fear of the unknown, fear of the future, here's where you find a firm foundation, here's where you find security. It's by being rich in generosity rather than by pursuing getting rich in wealth, okay? Now, contrast what he teaches here about, this is what we'll call the firm foundation with what he said about wealth. He's saying wealth is so uncertain, but he says generosity provides a firm foundation. It says where we want a firm foundation for our future doesn't come from wealth, it comes from our generosity. To me, I read that and go, that's unrealistic. That does not make sense. That does not make any fiscal sense whatsoever. Paul, what have the Romans done to your head? So they hit it one too many times, you're in that jail cell there, right? And again, Paul, knowing that there'd be this objection, probably is your objection, you're really telling me that the biggest thing that's going to create a foundation to secure my future is not by getting more wealth, it's actually by giving more of it away? And Paul's like, yeah. What do you mean? That I've got the calculator out here. It's not adding up. Paul knowing our objection, Paul knowing not only Timothy's objection, but probably the objection from his congregation in Ephesus, he answers it before we asked it. In the very next line, here's what he says. He goes, be rich in good deeds, be rich in generosity, so they may lay up a firm foundation for their future, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. What is that? Because we're promised so many things on the other end of our purchases and the other end of things we buy. If you buy this, happiness. If you purchase this, security. If you put it in this investment, you're safe. You can kick up your retirement. We are promised so many things in life by what we get and by what we purchase and by what we buy. But Paul's saying, if you want life that is truly life, and you want to take hold of life that is truly life, it's found not on what you get, but on the other end of what you give. Ultimately, a life that doesn't come from what you get, but from what you give. A life that doesn't find fulfillment in more stuff, but a life that finds fulfillment in making a difference. A life that doesn't just collect things, but a life that can enjoy things, right? And Paul's wanting to pass some to Timothy, who in turn will pass it on to his congregation, and then we'll keep these letters written from Paul. And so in 2021, we can still be reading the very convictions that were from those who saw Jesus and walked with Jesus and learned the very secret to getting what you really, really want from those who found what they really, really wanted. And it wasn't about having it all, but it's about how to learn to enjoy it all, irrespective of how much wealth that you have. He says that to look at what it means to be rich, we have to have a completely new definition. In other words, he's saying the life that is truly life, it means to have what money could never buy and never secure for us. The life that is truly life. Now, we may live lives in such a way that success isn't measured by how much we have, but rather our success is measured by how much you and I give away with our lives. And this morning, I'm encouraging you, whenever you're watching this, that you would consider what you define as treasure. That we wouldn't have to wait in order to have more wealth before you and I can learn to be rich. You don't need anything more right now in your life for you to be rich in righteousness. For you to make a difference with what is in your hands and with what you have with your life. I heard it said once before, probably on Twitter or something like that. It says a life that counts cannot be measured by just the things that you can count. I don't know about you, but I want my life to count. I want my life to count beyond me. I want to make a difference in the world. And I wonder if this is what Paul is suggesting is the life that is truly life. A life that isn't lost when things are lost, but life that is discovered in the richness and fulfillment of being rich in righteousness and being generous to the world around us. In other words, he's saying this: you and I don't have to wait to have enough before we can take hold of true life. Now listen, for the Christians, this isn't even a trick idea, right? We would argue that we have found true life through trust in Jesus. This is the promise of life. This is the promise of salvation through trusting Jesus. So the Christian would say, yeah, we have found true life through trusting in Jesus. We have found salvation. Jesus promised that in him is life. Jesus promised that he has come to give abundant life, like the life that is truly life. This is what Jesus has promised to give us. So if you're a Jesus follower here, this is what we've convinced of and believe we've found through putting our trust in Jesus. And if you're someone who's not a Jesus follower, someone who wouldn't consider yourself a Christian, the invitation from Jesus is to trust him with your life, and you will discover the life that is truly life. But it's one thing to have it. But Paul says, listen, here's the secret to taking hold of the life that is truly life. We might have true life through faith in Jesus, but we take hold of that true life by being generous like God is generous. And the difference between having true life and taking hold of it. And I wonder if for some of you here this morning, you've found true life in Jesus, but you haven't taken hold of it. And you're wondering why worry is still owning you, stress about the future is still owning you. God, where are you in all this? You're saying you do know there's a bit of like encouragement or even commands right back from the beginning of how to actually take hold. This isn't a command for you to be right with God. This is a command for you to be like God, and to be generous as God is generous, and to follow his example on the earth, and to be a witness to the life of Jesus by how you are generous with your life. So the question I want to finish, not just today with, but this series, and hopefully a question that you and I will wrestle with all the time in our life, is how can you and I begin to take hold of the life that is truly life? And I know this, for some of us, you are well on your journey of pursuing this, and this is involved, you budget being generous in your life, and this is a discipline. But for some of you, this might be a genuine trust step or faith step to go, all right, I'm going to start. I need to start trusting God in this area. I need to start taking hold of the life that is truly life. And my hope and prayer for us as a church community, and if I imagine that I'm like a Timothy and I've just received this letter from Paul and I'm reading this parchment, and he said, I want you to command those in your congregation to be rich in good deeds, to be generous and willing to share. I can imagine like Timothy going, yeah, does Paul do not understand? Like, these guys have businesses to run, mortgages to serve, kids to put in school. Like, their lives are full and busy, and you're commanding them. It's like, I see why. So they don't get caught in the same rat race that the rest of the world is caught in. That they don't drown in the same fear that everyone else is drowning in, but that they may experience and they may take hold of the life that is truly life. And as your pastor, as the position of Timothy here, I would be not honest, and I would be not authentic, and in some ways not obedient to my command, to my commission to exhort, encourage, inspire. I'm going to avoid the other word because he does it. But I want to say, guys, for some of you need to take your first step in budgeting, giving right at the top of what you got, and to practice what it is to take hold of the life that is truly life. And I'm going to believe for you that maybe those of you who are worried and stressed, and they're real things, this is not to diminish what you're carrying, but that you would experience the peace and life of God whilst you were journeying through all these issues and these realities that you're wrestling with in your life. And beyond that, that we would be the type of church community on the Sunshine Coast, in Canberra and beyond, that makes a difference for generations to come, so that when we get to the end of our life, we won't just look back and go, look how successful we were, but that we'll be able to look back and go, look at the difference we made with what our Heavenly Father gave us to steward. So God, help us. Like, this is such a big deal, and we need you. I'm praying, Holy Spirit, for every individual that has their own race to run right now and their own budget and their own realities they're navigating. I'm asking for wisdom. I'm asking for courage in all of our lives to make wise decisions, and decisions of obedience and decisions of following the Jesus way. Would you help us wrestle with this? For those who feel like they're buried under the weight of debt, or buried under the weight of fear of the future, or anxiety about the unknown, I pray this morning that you would minister to all of their hearts. Help us to see the Jesus way in the middle of the mess of our way. We need you in our lives, God. I thank you for your provision in every person's life here. And those who are believing for houses, those who are believing to sell their house, those who are believing for a new job, those who are believing for a job, those who are believing to help their kids out, whatever their prayers are, I'm asking that you would show yourself as our provider in every need and in every way. And you would continually to help us as a community to make a difference in the world. In the name of Jesus. Just as every head's bowed this morning, I want to pray one more prayer as we close. Maybe for some of you, even this step of being generous and following the Jesus way seems a bit far down the track for you. But for you, you just need to make a decision to make that first step to trust Jesus with your life. I want to pray a prayer this morning. I'm going to ask us all to pray it out loud after me together. And it's a prayer of putting your trust in Jesus. Maybe you've never done that before, and I'm telling you, the promise that Jesus has for you is that you would know the life that is truly life. And you won't get it in anything you can buy. You won't get it in any entertainment or any other human relationship. What Jesus offers, no one else offers. It's not about joining a church. It's not about being in some religious, well-behaved men's club at all. It's about where you put the trust of your life in. And I want to invite you this morning to put your trust in Jesus. So this morning, as all our heads are bowed for a moment of privacy, let's pray this prayer out loud together. And I want to invite those of you who maybe have never trusted Jesus, or maybe you need to recommit your life to Jesus. Perhaps for some of you, you're watching along online and you need to do this too. Can we pray this out loud together? So dear Heavenly Father, thank you for loving me, forgiving me of all my mistakes, and offering me a second chance. So today I decide to trust you with my life. I believe in Jesus and I'm following you. Amen.